Every year I like to do a roundup of my personal favourite models of the year, along with some honourable mentions based on purchases I made during the year. It's time to take a closer look at some of the highlights from those models I covered in 2022. Hi, welcome to my annual roundup of my personal favourites of those models I reviewed in 2022, as well as some honourable mentions across a number of other categories. As I go through the models, I'll also be calling out my winners in the following categories: Best Running Model of the Year, Best Budget Model of the Year, Best Value Model of the Year, and Best Bargain of the Year. Before we get started, I want to cover a number of points. Firstly, I kept my selection of models a lot tighter this year, and as such there are no runaway lemons waiting to be battered to pieces in this video. Only models that were available for the first time in calendar 2022 are eligible for my top 5. My honourable mentions can include older models which I only ended up purchasing in calendar 2022. Okay, let's get into it. I'm going to start out with some honourable mentions. And my bargain of the year is the Hornby Belmont Pullman train pack. There were a number of attractive bargains available from retailers throughout the year, but this one stood out for me given the quality on offer of a nicely liveried, good-running Class 67, along with 3 superbly detailed lighted Pullman coaches. For £200, this represented exceptional value for a very high-quality set. My next honourable mention is the venerable Class 68 from Dapol in the splendid TPE livery. I've been a long-term fan of the Dapol Class 68 since its introduction in 2017, and given Dapol have also been able to pretty well hold the original pricing for the DCC Ready model, and giving that model my award as the best value model for 2022. I've covered the Dapol Class 68 many times on the channel in the past, and you'll see the TPE version again when I review the Accurascale Mark V set in that livery. A great model at a great price. I got my first experience of the Hornby Class 66 this year, and to be honest I was pleasantly surprised. At £50 for the model I purchased, it was a close contender for bargain of the year, and for a model in this price bracket, there wasn't anything wrong with it. Yes, it has traction tyres, no lighting and no fitted detail, but with a large range of liveries and a better motor than I've seen in earlier Hornby railroad diesels, which is what this model is regardless of what box it comes in. I can't find fault with it for what it is. The hobby needs more models in this price range, and a step above it, which brings me to my next honourable mention in the form of this Railroad Plus model from Hornby. I was keen to see what the Plus gave you. It had a nice livery, some painted detail on the bogies, and etched nameplates. It also had an equivalent or perhaps slightly better motor to the Class 66. To win its Plus tag for me, I would have liked to see some basic lighting at least. Still, this model performed well in the running session, and with its attractive colourless livery I was quite taken by it and felt it would be worth adding lighting and some low-cost sound to complete the package. This model is a definite improvement over the extremely poor Railroad Class 47s I've experienced in the past. It was a toss-up versus the Class 66, but I'm giving my Best Budget Model award to this Railroad Plus model from Hornby. We need more and better models in this price range, particularly at a time now when people won't be in a position to spend upwards of £200 on a model. My last honourable mention is actually an N-gauge model in the form of the superb Kato Class 800 Azuma. Delivered as either a standalone train pack or packaged by Gauge Master as part of a full train set, this model was an eye-opener to me on multiple fronts when I reviewed it towards the back end of last year. If my top 5 was for N-gauge models, this would probably be number 1. This set was probably the closest thing I got to a flawless modelling experience all year, and I even did Kato the injustice in terms of my performance assessment, not factoring the fact that the lower power settings on the controller are used for powering the model lighting without the model actually moving. Designed and manufactured in Japan, the quality, performance and value of this model is a proof of what can be achieved outside of the contracted offshoring model that has become the de facto for almost all UK models these days. If Kato ever choose to turn their hand to 00 gauge UK models, particularly modern image models like the Class 800, I wouldn't have any hesitation in being an early adopter to see what they can deliver. Now, N-Gauge isn't for me, but that didn't stop me admiring the Kato Class 800, which is a superb example of how to marry excellent performance, high quality and exceptional value all in the same package. And so that brings me to my top 5 favourite models for 2022. Number 5 on the list is a bellwether from Hornby in the form of their Class 43 HST in the First Great Western blue livery based on the 2008 tooling. It's testimony to the original design that a model of such a vintage can still hold up today. Yes, it is showing its age in terms of lighting limitations and some notable softening of the mould, but this version of Hornby's Class 43 is still one of my favourite models of all time. Now, things didn't start out too well for this model back in January. Its out-of-box performance was atrocious and clearly signalled an internal fault rather than any drop-off in this model's capabilities. The PCB changed later and the model was back on my tracks, performing as I would expect any proper Class 43 to perform. Different models inspire different emotions, and for me the Class 43 is all about speed and fun. It's a great running model with a superb kick that you only find on the faster high-speed models. While it mightn't be for the faint-hearted, I can't ever go through a running session with the Class 43 without bringing it through its paces. My biggest issue with this model wasn't anything to do with the model itself, but with its price. How a 2008 tool model can be priced at this level is beyond me, and prompted a whole video on determining what a reasonable price for the Class 43 and the Class 800 should be in 2022. I was fortunate enough to pre-order this model at a more competitive price point, but there is no way I can endorse where it ended up price-wise. Hornby's second entry in my top 5 this year is their Class 800/1 LNER liveried Azuma, number 800-210. If you've watched my Class 800 reviews, you know that I'm a fan of this class and was pretty pleased with Hornby's earlier renditions of it. I had pre-ordered my Azuma over a year before, so the price I paid ended up being significantly less than the revised asking price when this model arrived. The increasing price, combined with the lack of improvements to the class over its earlier incarnations, were sources of frustration for me, and the reason this model isn't figuring higher on this list. I still like this model, and similar to the GWR Class 800 last year, the Hornby Azuma is one of my favourite models for this year. There is room for improvement, and hopefully either Hornby or a competitor will take on the challenge of making this model the best it can be. I've been a long-term Class 55 Deltic fan. When I first saw the Accurascale announcement, it took my interest right away in terms of the specification and level of coverage of the different liveries. From day one, 55022 Royal Scots Grey was my favourite, and while the other two variants added to my fleet are also magnificent looking models, 55022 was the one that stood out for me. It could have, and probably should have been, my number 1 for this year, if it weren't for 2 areas that I wasn't hugely happy about. Unfortunately, the bogie chain fiasco took the gloss off these models for me, and many others with issues around derailment, chains coming loose and chains falling off. I know some people had other problems with this range of models, which fortunately I didn't have. The other weakness I felt with this model was a lack of robustness around the underbody and the lightness of the bogies. While superbly detailed, I would have expected a stronger and more solid bogie for what is a heavy model by any standards. Accurascale have announced a rerun of these models, which will hopefully address all of the main issues people had with the originals. Taking the issues off the table, I still love my 3 Accurascale Class 55s. For me anyway, they capture the power of this iconic locomotive. The Bachmann models weren't bad by any means and would hold up as more budget models today. Side by side, they show their age and lack of depth of detail to their Accurascale counterparts. If you'd asked me at the start of 2022 as to what my favourite model was likely to be for the year, 55022 would have been top of my list. With bogie chains removed, I still like this model a lot, and it probably edges out my Bachmann DP1 as my favourite Deltic in the fleet. Coming in at number 2 on the list is the Bachmann Class 47, locomotive number 47711, Greyfriars Bobby, in the BR Blue large logo livery. This model actually tipped the number 1 model on this list as the best running locomotive of the year, surpassing all previous Bachmann Class 47s I've ever owned, and in general these were all excellent performing models in their own right. The Accurascale Class 55 was also in contention here, but as it required removal of the bogey chains to avoid running issues, it couldn't be a contender for this particular title. 47-711 was as smooth as silk out of the box. I love the large logo livery, and I also like the excellent detail, comprehensive lighting, and great sound on this model. And while I still love this model, it fell just a little bit short on the visual side versus the number 1 model on my list for this year. Still, I wanted to get my hands on a BR large logo Class 47 this year, and I'm more than pleased with the superb looking and performing model. With a lot of them now discounted by retailers, Bachmann's retooled Class 47 range is definitely worth a second look if you haven't already taken the plunge. And so we get to my number 1 favourite model of 2022. Similar to 55022, when I saw the final liveries for the Class 92, 92032 straight away became the number 1 on my most wanted list. It didn't arrive in time for the start of my Class 92 review, which ultimately became a more protracted affair than I had hoped for due to a motor fault on the original review model 92003. I used 92032 to complete that review, and it was and still is an impeccably smooth and silent runner. Its only failing on the performance front, which was common to 92003 as well, was in not achieving its prototypical scale speed, which is why Greyfire's Bobby took the performance title this year. In all other respects though, my 92032 has been a superb model. I love the livery, I love the overall detail of the model, the lighting, the pantographs and the sound. Yes, there are some areas for improvement that I covered in my review that apply to all of the Accurascale 92s, but I've yet to see a totally perfect railway model, and I expect it'll be a few years before I do. It may have only just made it in time to be included as part of my 2022 list, but this Class 92 from Accurascale was my favourite model of the year and is definitely up there as one of my favourite models of all time. So there you have it. Obviously my list is limited by the models I actually reviewed this year, and I'm sure there are lots of other fine models that were released in 2022, so please let me know your favourites and also your disappointments in the comments. I had originally intended to review the Hornby Class 91 and Mark IV coaches and DVT, but the Hornby price increases at the time meant that became an investment I was no longer interested in making, particularly when you also factor the addition of a £120 DCC sound decoder, which I would have also wanted. In the absence of testing this model myself, I would welcome any feedback in the comments as to what I missed. I passed on the retooled Bachmann Class 37 release, as I have pre-orders in for the Accurascale Class 37 and still retained a sizable number of my original Bachmann Class 37 fleet, which are all top models that I'm happy with. If you picked up one of these new Bachmann Class 37s, please let me know how that model has been for you. I am due to cover the Dapol Class 59. I'm just waiting for my pre-order of a fully loaded Gagemaster version in the GBrF livery. I look forward to reviewing that as soon as it lands. So what are your thoughts of my top 5 list? And what would your top 5 purchases for 2022 look like? Please let me know in the comments. I want to thank you for joining today's video. Please hit a like if you found it of interest, and please subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more content like this. And I'll hopefully see you on the next one. In the meantime, keep safe and happy modelling.